Can I ask you something? Barron Trump's voice broke through the steady hum of the diner. His tone was calm, yet commanding, drawing Claire's attention immediately. She turned, balancing a tray of half-cleared dishes, and faced the young man seated in the corner booth. Even in the unassuming setting, there was something striking about him. His tall frame and sharp, composed demeanor stood out in the noisy diner, where most customers slouched over their meals or tapped impatiently on their phones. Barron Trump didn't look like someone who belonged here, but he sat quietly, his gaze unwavering as he studied her. "How long have you been working here?" he asked, his question oddly personal yet disarmingly polite. Claire hesitated, caught off guard. Almost 3 years, she replied, setting down the tray and tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "Why?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back slightly, his blue eyes scanning her face as if trying to read her thoughts. "You seem tired," he said finally, his words soft but deliberate. For a moment, Claire didn't know how to respond. It wasn't rude, the way he said it. It was observant. She glanced down at her scuffed shoes, suddenly feeling exposed. "Long shifts," she said with a forced smile. "Part of the job." Barron nodded, but the look in his eyes lingered, heavy with something Claire couldn't quite place. "You work hard," he said simply, as though it was a fact, not a compliment. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. She'd heard plenty of empty praise from customers before, but this felt different. It wasn't just words. It was acknowledgement, almost as if he saw through the carefully maintained facade of cheerful resilience she wore every day. "You're here alone?" he asked, changing the subject as he gestured toward his plate. "No one else?" Claire nodded. "It's just me covering this shift." Barron's lips pressed into a thoughtful line as he reached for his wallet. He paused for a moment, then slid a sleek black card onto the edge of the table. "You deserve more than just tips," he said, almost to himself before meeting her eyes. "Thank you for everything you do." Claire froze, unsure how to process the moment. Before she could respond, he stood, slipping on a coat and walking toward the door, leaving her staring at the table, where a thick envelope now rested next to the untouched receipt. Barron Trump, sitting with the same composed air, motioned Claire over just as she was clearing another table. She hesitated for a second, wondering if he needed something extra, or perhaps had a complaint. With a tired but polite smile, she walked toward him. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice carrying the practiced warmth of someone used to masking exhaustion. He looked up at her, his gaze steady but kind. "You work long hours, don't you?" he asked, his tone casual but carrying an undertone of genuine curiosity. Claire chuckled softly, wiping her hands on her apron. "You could say that," she replied. "It comes with the territory." Barron leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped in front of him on the table. "Do you enjoy it?" he asked, not with judgment, but as if he truly wanted to know. The question caught her off guard. It wasn't something customers usually asked. Most barely noticed her beyond taking their orders. She glanced around the diner, then back at him. "It's honest work," she said carefully. "It pays the bills, keeps me moving. Can't complain too much." But something in her voice betrayed the deeper struggles she didn't say out loud. Barron seemed to notice. He tilted his head, studying her face for a moment. "Do you ever think about doing something else?" The question stung in a way she hadn't expected. Did she think about it? All the time. But dreams didn't pay medical bills or rent. "Doesn't everyone?" she said lightly, avoiding his eyes. "But life doesn't always give you the luxury to choose." Her words hung in the air for a moment, and for the first time, Claire thought she saw a flicker of something deeper in his expression. Understanding. Maybe even empathy. "I think you're stronger than most people realize," he said quietly, his voice almost a whisper. Claire blinked, caught off guard by the sudden weight of his words. Before she could respond, he leaned back, signaling that the conversation was over. She nodded politely and returned to her work, trying to shake off the strange feeling his words had left behind. When she came back to clear his table, Barron was gone. All that remained was his receipt, carefully folded next to a plain white envelope. Claire paused, her fingers brushing against it. She assumed it was a tip, generous maybe, but nothing extraordinary. With a sigh, she tucked it into her apron pocket, unaware that her life was about to change forever. Claire leaned against the counter, exhaustion sinking into her bones as the last customer left the diner. The hum of the fluorescent lights above was the only sound now, a stark contrast to the chaos just hours earlier. She reached into her apron pocket, pulling out the folded white envelope Barron had left behind. She stared at it for a moment, her mind replaying their brief exchange. His calm demeanor, those piercing blue eyes, and the peculiar way he spoke, it all felt strangely significant now, though she couldn't quite say why. With a deep breath, she unfolded the envelope, expecting a generous tip, maybe $20 or $50 at most. Her hands froze. Inside was a crisp check, and the number written on it seemed to mock her reality. $50,000. Her breath hitched, and the room seemed to tilt slightly. She blinked, certain she was seeing it wrong. But there it was, $50,000. Her name written neatly on the payee line, and below it, a handwritten note. For someone who deserves more than just gratitude. Barron. Claire's legs gave way, and she collapsed onto the nearest stool, the envelope slipping from her trembling hands. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, her mind racing with questions. Why me? What did I do to deserve this? She whispered to herself, her voice barely audible in the empty diner. The kitchen door swung open, and her coworker, Marie, poked her head out. Claire, you okay? She asked, her voice tinged with concern. Wordlessly, Claire held up the check. Marie's eyes widened as she rushed over, snatching it from Claire's hand to read it. Oh my God, she gasped. This is real? Who gave you this? That guy, Claire managed, her voice shaky. The one in the corner booth. I didn't even know who he was. Marie's jaw dropped. Wait, are you saying Barron Trump gave you this? As in, the Barron Trump? Claire nodded slowly, the weight of the moment crashing over her. It wasn't just the money. It was what it represented. Someone had seen her, not just as a waitress or a tired worker scraping by, but as a person worthy of acknowledgement, of kindness, of hope. Her emotions surged, disbelief, gratitude, and a touch of fear. Was this real? Was it a mistake? She clutched the check tightly, tears welling up in her eyes as she whispered, What do I do now? Marie placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You cash it, Claire, and you change your life. Claire sat there, the enormity of the gesture sinking in, as the words on the note played over and over in her mind. For someone who deserves more than just gratitude. Claire burst out of the diner's door, her heart racing as her eyes scanned the nearly empty parking lot. Rain drizzled under the dim glow of streetlights, painting the asphalt with a shimmering sheen. Her gaze darted in every direction, searching for the tall figure of Barron Trump. But he was gone. No car, no sign of him. Just the quiet hum of the city night. Her fingers tightened around the check in her pocket as she turned back to the diner, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Why would someone like him, a man she barely knew, leave her something so extravagant? It didn't make sense. She leaned against the counter inside, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. There had to be answers. Typing his name into the search bar, her breath caught as photos of Barron Trump filled the screen. Images of him in tailored suits, standing beside his father, his family. Figures she'd only ever seen on television. That's him, she thought, staring at the familiar sharp features and calm, watchful eyes. The same eyes that had met hers with quiet kindness just hours ago. Her mind raced. Why would someone like him, with his wealth and privilege, take an interest in someone like her? The memory of their brief conversation replayed in her mind, his thoughtful questions, the way he noticed her exhaustion, his unassuming nature. But none of it explained this. Claire glanced at the check again, her stomach knotting with doubt. What if it was some kind of mistake? Or worse, what if it was a cruel joke? The amount seemed surreal. More money than she had ever dreamed of holding at once. She tapped her phone nervously, pulling up a banking app to check the routing number. It matched, confirming the check's legitimacy. Her thoughts spiraled. Could she accept this? Did she even deserve it? Her mind whispered doubts, the same ones that had haunted her for years. You're just a waitress. You're not special. This kind of thing doesn't happen to people like you. Tears welled in her eyes as she stared at the note again. For someone who deserves more than just gratitude. The words struck a chord deep inside her, challenging every insecure thought clawing at her. Marie appeared from the back of the diner, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "Claire, what are you going to do?" she asked softly. "I don't know," Claire whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't even know why he did it." Marie touched her arm gently. "Maybe you don't need to know why. Maybe you just need to believe you're worth it." Claire's breath hitched as the words sank in. For the first time in years, a spark of hope flickered in her chest, fragile but alive. The question now wasn't about the check. It was about whether she could believe in herself enough to use it. Claire sat at the small kitchen table, the check still clutched tightly in her hands. Across from her, her mother, a frail woman with gentle eyes and graying hair, stared at the piece of paper as though it were a mirage. The dim light of their apartment flickered softly, casting shadows on walls lined with medical bills and reminders of their struggles. "Claire," her mother whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. Is it real?" Claire nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "It's real, Mom. I checked everything, twice. Barron Trump, that man at the diner, he left this for me." Her voice wavered as she spoke, her emotions a fragile mix of gratitude, disbelief, and a sense of unworthiness. Her mother's hand reached across the table, trembling as it rested on Claire's. "Why would he do that? Why you?" Claire swallowed hard, her heart heavy. "I don't know. He asked me a few questions, saw how tired I was, I guess. Maybe he just felt something." She paused, the weight of their shared history pressing down on her. "But Mom, why me? I'm just a waitress. What could he possibly have seen?" Her mother's eyes softened, her voice filled with quiet strength. "He saw you, Claire. The real you. The one who gave up her dreams without hesitation to take care of me. The one who works herself to the bone so we can have a roof over our heads. That's what he saw." Claire's chest tightened, her mother's words stirring memories she often buried. Dropping out of college halfway through her degree, when her mother's illness worsened, the endless nights spent working double shifts, and the countless times she'd hidden her exhaustion behind a practiced smile. "It doesn't feel like enough," Claire admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've worked so hard, and it feels like I'm just treading water." Her mother's grip tightened. "You've done more than enough, and maybe this is the universe's way of giving something back to you." Claire stared down at the note Barron had left. "For someone who deserves more than just gratitude." The words felt heavier now. Not just a gift, but a challenge to see herself the way someone else had. After a long silence, Claire rose from the table, grabbing a pen and a piece of paper. Her mother watched as Claire began to write, her hands steady but her heart racing. "Dear Mr. Trump," she began, "I don't know how to thank you for what you've done." As the words flowed, tears slid down her cheeks. This wasn't just a letter. It was a piece of herself, poured out in gratitude and hope. It was the beginning of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Belief in a brighter future. Claire wandered through the aisles of the small bookstore, her mind still restless despite the soothing scent of paper and ink. She had spent the last few days replaying the moment at the diner, the check, and Barron Trump's enigmatic gesture. No matter how much she thought about it, she couldn't shake the questions. Why her? What had he seen in her that she couldn't see in herself? As she turned the corner, her eyes caught a familiar figure. Tall, composed, and effortlessly poised, Barron stood near a display of classics, thumbing through a worn hardcover. For a moment, Claire froze. Her breath hitched as disbelief washed over her. Of all the places, how could he be here? Her heart pounded in her chest as she debated whether to approach him. What could she even say? Yet the check in her wallet felt heavier than ever, its presence a reminder of the gratitude she had yet to express. Summoning her courage, she took a shaky step forward. "Excuse me, Mr. Trump?" Her voice wavered slightly, but it was enough to catch his attention. Barron looked up, his sharp blue eyes meeting hers. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by a small, polite smile. "Claire," he said, his tone warm and steady. "From the diner." She nodded, her nerves barely contained. I, I just wanted to thank you, she said quickly, her words tumbling over each other. For what you did, the check, the note, I don't even know how to put it into words. Barron closed the book he'd been holding, giving her his full attention. You don't have to, he replied gently. I didn't do it for thanks. His response caught her off guard. Then why? She asked, her voice soft but urgent. Why me? I'm just nobody. His expression softened, a flicker of something deeply human crossing his features. You're not nobody, he said firmly. When I sat in that diner, I saw someone who worked tirelessly, someone who treated every customer with kindness, even when they didn't deserve it. Someone who deserved more than life was giving her. Claire's eyes welled with tears, his words touching a part of her she hadn't dared to acknowledge. But you don't even know me, she whispered. You're right, Barron admitted. But sometimes, you don't need to know someone's entire story to recognize their worth. Your resilience reminded me of values I was taught but don't always get to see. I wanted to honor that. The weight of his words hung between them, raw and real. Claire took a deep breath, her heart lighter yet full at the same time. Thank you, she said again, this time with all the emotion she could muster. Barron gave her a small nod. Use it well, he said simply, before turning back to the books. Claire left the store, her chest tight with gratitude and resolve. For the first time she felt something new, a belief in the power of her own story. The smell of freshly baked bread filled the small bakery as Claire wiped her hands on her apron, watching the first few customers of the day filter in. The shop, modest yet warm and inviting, was more than a business to her. It was a testament to how far she'd come. She glanced at a framed photo on the wall, a picture of her mother standing beside the bakery's opening sign, tears of pride streaming down her face. Claire had used Barron Trump's life-changing gift to pay off her mother's medical bills first. The relief of clearing those debts felt like shedding a weight she'd carried for years. With the remaining money, she'd taken a leap of faith, investing in the dream she had buried long ago, her own bakery. Now, as the sunlight poured through the windows, lighting up the rows of pastries and cakes, she felt something unfamiliar. Peace. At the diner, a different kind of buzz had taken hold. After Claire's story became known, inspired by her viral op-ed in the local newspaper, customers started leaving larger tips, sharing heartfelt messages with the staff. The community rallied behind the idea of unexpected kindness, and the small acts began to ripple outward. Marie, her co-worker, even began a kindness jar, where patrons could contribute to help someone in need, a tribute to Barron's generosity that had started it all. But for Claire, it wasn't just about the money. It was about the belief someone had placed in her. Sitting down one evening, she poured her heart into the op-ed, sharing her story with the world. Kindness, she wrote, isn't just about grand gestures. It's about seeing someone, really seeing them, and reminding them they're worthy. A stranger walked into my life one ordinary day and reminded me of my own worth, something I had forgotten. His generosity didn't just change my circumstances. It changed my belief in myself. The article caught fire, shared across social media, and even mentioned in a national news segment. People from all walks of life reached out to Claire, sharing their own stories of unexpected kindness. It was as if Barron's simple act had unlocked something greater, a reminder of the humanity we all share. One quiet afternoon, as Claire wiped the counter of her bakery, she noticed a familiar figure walking through the door. Barron Trump. He carried the same calm demeanor, his piercing blue eyes scanning the shop before landing on her. It suits you, he said, gesturing to the space around him. Claire smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. It's because of you, she said softly. No, Barron replied. It's because of you. In that moment, Claire understood. His gift wasn't just about the money. It was about lighting a fire within her to believe in her own strength. And in doing so, he had changed more lives than either of them could have ever imagined. Claire's story is a powerful reminder that one small act of kindness can ripple into something extraordinary. It's not just about the money or the gesture. It's about seeing someone's potential and empowering them to believe in themselves. What if today you became someone's Barron Trump? What if you extended a hand, shared a kind word, or helped someone realize their worth? You don't need a big check to make a difference. Your time, Your empathy and your intention can spark a change just as profound. Let Claire's journey inspire you to look beyond the surface and truly see the people around you. Who knows? The next life you touch might just be the beginning of a story as extraordinary as hers. Leave a comment below about a time someone's kindness changed your life. Or better yet, share how you plan to pass it forward. Remember, it only takes one moment to change everything.